so punitive, power assertive punishment is bad for children. What do we do instead then? Well, here's some techniques. First, minimize the conflict. Create less opportunities for conflict, less opportunities for the child to get in trouble. One way to do this is through schedules and routines. This helps children know what to expect. If bedtime follows the same routine every night, they aren't caught off guard when you announce it's time to go to bed. This doesn't always work. I have the same routine every night at my house and my kid still complains. But routines and schedules still help remove uncertainty. So even when he complains, I can say, we do this every night. You knew it was coming. You have to brush your teeth every night. This isn't new. Another way is the environment. Manage the environment to minimize opportunity for the child to get into trouble. So for example, remove breakables, put child safety locks on off-limit drawers and cabinets. If there's something they're not supposed to get into, make it so they can't get into it. A preschool teacher was interviewed once and she was asked, what do you do when a child gets something they're not supposed to have? And her response was, if they're not supposed to have it, it's not where they can reach it. So move opportunities for them to get into trouble out of the way. Again, reduce conflict, reduce their chances of getting into trouble. Have strict but reasonable rules. So these are rules for behavior that all of the family has to follow. We talked about this when we discussed authoritative parenting and communication. It makes it easier for children to follow rules if everyone has to do them. For example, everyone washes their hands before dinner, not just the children. No one is allowed to use swear words, etc. You can't have one set of rules for your children and a different set of rules for yourself. That can create resentment. Rules should be consistent and have reasons that children understand. Don't just have a rule, give them a reason for it. Tell them why that rule exists. And children should be allowed to explain themselves when they broke a rule or if they disagree with it. In the end, the parent's will should prevail, but the child should have a chance to discuss themselves and maybe even open it for negotiation. The child needs to feel heard. And if a child has a role in creating the rules for the house, they're more likely to follow them because they feel more ownership. Those are their rules. They helped create those rules, so they're more likely to follow them. Praise good behavior. Don't just punish bad behavior. Don't just point out bad behavior. Give attention to the good behavior. In fact, give good behavior more attention than the bad behavior. So that keeps children from doing bad stuff just to get attention. So instead of, let's say you take a kid to the grocery store and they're a terror, they're running around, they're putting their hands on everything, instead of yelling at them constantly for what they're doing wrong, instead when they go to the grocery store and they do behave well, you really praise them for that. I really like how you stayed next to me and didn't put things in the cart without asking. I really like how you played nicely with your brother today. Point out good behavior and be very specific about what they did that was good. Constant praise gives negative effects, however. We'll talk about praise later. So save the praise for the really important or special things, and it can be particular to each child. One child might need praise for something that another child doesn't need it for. But focus more on the good behavior than the bad. Next, recognize that self-control is a skill. Self-control is not inborn, and it's not something that children will learn if they just work harder at it. It's a developmental skill that doesn't fully develop until late adolescence. It requires development of the prefrontal cortex, which I have said many times and will say many more times, does not finish developing until about 25. So children cannot exert the same level of self-control as an adult. Their brains cannot do it. So you shouldn't expect them to do it. However, there are some ways we can help. Parenting can help children develop self-control. Remember from our discussion of parenting styles, the more control parents exert on their children, the less the children learn to control themselves. Parents who encourage independence and allow children to make decisions actually have children with greater self-control. It may seem counterintuitive, but think about it again. If you had parents who always tied your shoes for you, would you ever learn to tie them for yourself? If your parents always did your laundry for you, would you know how to do it on your own? Parents who give control to their children let their children practice the skill of self-control. Delayed gratification is a big part of self-control, and I'm sure you all know people who are really bad at delayed gratification and some who are better at it. So Bandura, if you remember him, did a study on delayed gratification. Children watched an adult either choose immediate or delayed gratification. Children were then given similar choices. Of the children exposed to the model of delayed gratification, 50% shifted to delayed rewards on their second test, and vice versa. So, conclusion, children model adult behaviors of self-control. If they see adults who are practicing self-control and delayed gratification, they are more likely to do it themselves. We need to use appropriate discipline on children. Unacceptable behavior cannot be ignored. It sends a signal that the child is not important and that his behavior doesn't matter, and we don't want to do that. Spanking may temporarily stop the behavior, but it produces long-term negative effects such as aggression and depression and a lot more. So, avoid overreacting. When a child misbehaves, parents can get very emotional and overreact. And when parents do overreact, maybe by yelling too much or sending their child to their room in a fit of anger, when parents do this, they need to acknowledge it and they need to apologize to their kids. Don't take the idea that a parent has to put on the facade of perfection. Parents need to acknowledge when they make mistakes and apologize. Treat their children as individuals. Both the emotions and the apology are learning experience for the child. So you can sit down and say, I'm sorry that I took your toy away from you. I was angry. I shouldn't have done that. And the children learn from your apology too. It's important. Use explanations and reasoning. So before you punish them, tell them the reasons for it. They may not understand what it is that they did wrong or why it was wrong. So be sure you tell them why. And use developmentally appropriate techniques. Discipline techniques should vary based on the age and the development of the child. So for younger children, such as toddlers, just remove them from the situation and distract them with something else. Don't lecture them. It doesn't do any good. It can't reach their brains. But for older children, maybe use techniques such as removing privileges, discuss their behavior and the consequences, or even let the child help decide fair consequences. Often when you tell the child what consequences should there be for your behavior, oftentimes the child will choose something more severe than the parent would have done anyway. But remember that you need to use different techniques for different children. This is why we discussed temperament. Every child is different, and different discipline techniques might work really well on one and really poorly on another. So there is no one-size-fits-all solution to discipline. You really have to match it to the child. If all of this seems like more work than giving a quick spanking and moving on, you're right. That's the point. It's harder because it's better. It's better because it's harder. It improves the parent-child relationship, and it actually reduces future transgressions. It's a case of investing the time and energy now to save time and energy in the future. Child guidance is a parenting practice that is based on a lot of research, specifically attachment research. It minimizes the role of rewards and punishments and focuses instead on teaching children correct behavior with empathy. One technique is when you, I feel, because. Instead of yelling at a child for running into the street and punishing them, you could say, when you run out into the street, I feel scared because you could get hurt. You then follow that up with what they should do instead. Always give them appropriate behavior to replace the wrong behavior. You need to stay in the yard when you play outside, or make sure an adult is with you. I could teach a whole lecture on this parenting practice alone. I had a professor who taught a whole course on parenting, but we don't have the time. If you are interested in learning more about child guidance, there are some books I can recommend. I also have materials I could post or email to you. But a good book for this is called No Drama Discipline by Daniel Siegel. This is not on your reading list, but if you're interested, it's a wonderful read. It's by the same author as The Whole Brain Child, which is a book on your reading list. So now we're going to move on into family systems. Part of the family system is the marital relationship. When parents are in constant conflict, children become anxious, withdrawn, and aggressive. They're more prone to chronic disease. They have problems with their peers and in romantic relationships of their own. Seeing parents fight jeopardizes the child's view that the family is stable and secure. Conflict between parents spills over into the parent-child relationship. Parents who put too much energy into fighting with each other don't have the energy to be good parents. When disagreements are handled constructively, however, the child's belief that the family is cohesive and able to get through problems is strengthened. Children are able to use the positive approaches to conflict in their own relationships. So this means don't just hide all the conflict from the children, let them see constructive ways of dealing with it. There's something called a reciprocal influence. The family is a dynamic, interactive system. Parents influence children, absolutely, but children also influence the parents. Child behavior, interests, attitudes, temperament, etc. all influence how parents interact with that child. You parent differently based on your child's age, for instance. Also, a child who is more sensitive and affectionate will require different parenting than one who is independent and dislikes excessive affection. Parents shouldn't try to treat each child the exact same way, such as with the amount or type of affection, type of discipline, amount of control, etc. Each child is different. These differences influence and may lead families who get along, who fight a lot, who are disengaged, etc. So all these differences change the family. Negative patterns need to be acknowledged and modified before they lead to family unhappiness. Siblings. Siblings can drastically change the balance of a family. In many cultures, older siblings care for the younger siblings. This isn't so much true in the US. But interactions and relationships between siblings can be very complex. Older siblings are often a source of care and comfort to younger ones. They often act as teachers and role models. Some siblings become close friends and confidants. Others fight constantly. Patterns of sibling interactions tend to be established early and remain fairly stable throughout their lives. Siblings of the same gender tend to get along better, and relationships generally improve as the young siblings approach adolescence. Less conflict. Siblings get along better when parents are equally warm and affectionate with all of them and there are no perceived favorites. Birth order does matter. Only children, so children without siblings, are more likely to succeed in school, have higher levels of intelligence and self-esteem. Firstborn children are the guinea pigs for parents who are figuring out how to raise children, especially in the United States, where a lot of people don't have experience raising children until they have their own. Parents have high expectations for firstborns and are more affectionate and more punitive with them. With later children, parent expectations are more realistic and parents tend to become more relaxed. Firstborn children usually score higher on intelligence tests and are more likely to go to college. They're also more likely to conform to adult requests. Generally speaking, firstborns tend to display more leadership, teaching, helping, and caregiving behaviors. Later siblings are less concerned with pleasing their parents, they're more popular with their peers, and they're better innovators. Secondborn or more children are more likely to imitate, follow, and elicit help and care. Natural power differences between siblings occur as a result of age differences. This means that each child has a different experience in childhood than the others. For instance, younger siblings have the benefit of learning from the older siblings, taking full advantage of scaffolding. This means that younger siblings may develop skills at an earlier age than their older siblings did. Sibling relationships. Siblings can be a great source of comfort and support to each other. They can also be a source of conflict and stress. So sibling relationships give children a practice in a variety of cognitive, emotional, and social skills. They can practice empathy, resolving conflict, language, emotions, but sibling conflict can be really intense. Siblings fight. There's no getting around that. Sibling conflict is frequent. It's often poorly resolved and can easily turn aggressive. So the best way for parents to deal with sibling conflict isn't just to separate them, it's to act as the mediator and help them learn how to resolve the conflicts on their own, and that will improve sibling relationships. You also want to be careful to avoid differential treatment. When parents treat their children differently, it creates resentment and more aggression. This only happens if the children view the differences as unfair, however. So we will continue this discussion in the next video.